First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Everyone, welcome to Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. That is a live shot down there in the Willamette Valley right now from the Willamette Vineyards camera. Normally you'd see I-5, and you cannot. It is very foggy, so just be careful if you're heading down that way. Hello, everyone. As I said, I'm Greg Nibbler. Thanks for joining us here today. We are live streaming here every weekday at 1 p.m. Pacific on our website, our apps, and of course on our social media channels, so lots of ways that you can engage and interact with us. And today, for this segment, we're going to be talking about, well, what's right there. It's actually a new bill that was recently proposed that would expand telehealth and mental health to rural Oregonians, and a lot more, of course, involved in that as well. And to talk all about that, we are joined by Congresswoman Andrea Salinas, who is from the Oregon's 6th District. And Congresswoman, thank you, very much for joining us here today. Appreciate it, especially after the holidays, to find some time to be here with us. And I think to start off, what is it that you saw in your district that made you think that this is something that really needs to be advocated for?
Well, it's great to be here, Greg. Thank you. So, mental health in the United States is rampant, and those who suffer from mental health issues or substance use disorders are suffering across the board. Oregon, unfortunately, ranks towards the top in terms of mental illness and behavioral health problems. Yet, we always rank near the bottom in terms of access. And while mental health issues occur at a similar rate between urban and rural residents, many rural residents, especially those in my district, struggle to access services due to geographic issues, stigma, and a lack of insurance. And we know that telemental health can actually help address these issues by overcoming some of those geographic issues. And maybe, where somebody in Polk or Yamhill County may not have a provider that's very close, the use of telehealth and telemedicine is actually a great way to put them in contact with a mental or behavioral health provider.
And to bring everyone up to speed in case they may not be aware of the terminology there, just for telehealth and telemental health, can you explain what that is and how that would work?
Yeah, so it can work in a couple of different ways. Sometimes it's a patient getting on the telephone with an actual provider who is licensed in being able to diagnose and assess mental health problems. It could also be somebody jumping on a Zoom call like I'm on today. And so really having a face-to-face interaction with another provider. And it can provide patients the privacy and maybe reduce stigma for somebody who may not want to go in person to a brick and mortar clinic room to see a provider.
And I think that's a good point to bring up too, and just to ask about that. Why is it, do you think, that there is such a stigma, maybe particularly for rural, let me say that again, rural Oregonians? Why is it that you think there's such a stigma, particularly possibly for rural Oregonians, when it comes to mental health?
Yeah, so many workers in this sector, and I'm trying to focus this bill, and I think my colleagues on the Senate side, it's a bipartisan bill. We're really trying to focus it on what we are calling triple F workers. So those in the fishing, farming, and forestry sectors. Folks in these sectors, they work long hours. They're frequently more isolated from other people. And again, they may not have access to the healthcare providers who might be able to reach out. And so I think it is that stigma and isolation, in addition to a lot of other factors within their jobs, that constant year-round stress of not knowing where their profits are coming from, not knowing the ups and downs of commodity pricing. That all causes a lot of stress that is unique to these industries.
And looking at it, with those industries in particular, as you just mentioned, the three Fs, I think it was fishing, forestry, and farming, basically, that this would be targeted towards. How are you going to work on outreach to those industries, that if there is kind of the stigma and they don't have access already, how would you reach out to them to let them know of something like this?
Yeah, so what this bill really does is to try to address this problem is it would award grants to help expand and awarding grants to public or nonprofit entities who work in the telemental health space already to help expand access to these telemental health services for rural Americans, particularly those working in those three F areas, the farming, fishing, and forestry. And so what it would do is it allows the Health and Human Services to provide about $10 million nationwide for some demonstration projects to see, are there private, are there public or nonprofit agencies that can actually help reach out to these different types of industries. And what would that outreach look like? And what would the ultimate care look like? And then we would ask of those anybody applying for these kinds of grants to also provide some metrics on what the outcomes are of hopefully improved health.
And when we talk about that, from the rural side of things, could this also go hand in hand with expanded broadband access for some of those areas, especially if they're out in remote areas? Sometimes that is an issue.
Absolutely, that is an issue, and that is something I've been working on with my colleagues again in rural areas, because again, Oregon is not alone in this, and so we recognize that some of the maps that came out earlier to figure out what where and what kind of broadband is needed, what the speed levels are, and we are working on a farm bill reauthorization to look at just this unique problem for our rural communities, because again, we know that our farmers and ranchers utilize the internet, and they need broadband just like everybody else does. And that is an added stressor. So if you don't have it, it is a problem when it comes to doing business.
Absolutely. Yeah, for so many different reasons, and particularly, this one addressing mental health, which access to broadband is just something that we all need. So that's good to hear that this would kind of go hand in hand with that. I think, just to cover this for everybody, so this has been submitted. Can you talk about where this is at in the process and how has it been received, I guess, from some of your colleagues?
Yeah, so it's just been submitted. It was actually a bipartisan, bicameral bill. We have a couple of senators on the Senate side who introduced it first, somebody from South Dakota and somebody from Minnesota. And then I have been trying to find some Republican co-sponsors, and I have one Republican co-sponsor at this point, and who it is I'm blanking on right now, but this is going to be a bipartisan effort. Again, I know that my colleagues in different regions and different districts across the U.S. are seeing this challenge, and it's a reason why I stood up the mental health caucus, a rural mental health caucus earlier this year with Congresswoman Harshbarger. In fact, that's who it is. She is the co-sponsor of this bill. It's a big issue for her and her district.
And one other question, I guess you mentioned that this would provide some funding for a test, I guess, to try to test this out at first. Where would that funding come from?
That is coming from some additional funds that we know that the Health and Human Services department has right now. And so they would be able to they would be authorized to use up to $10 million. And so they can figure it out once people start applying for the grants, which makes the most sense.
And going from that, this bill submitted, so we'll see where that goes. And as you mentioned, bipartisan support, so certainly covers some important issues. We haven't, this is no secret, we haven't seen a lot of bills, it seems like, passed in the House or the Senate this year. And for many reasons, that could be a different discussion. But I know that you do have one that was recently passed. I'm sure people are in the comments discussing that side of things. But for the one that was recently passed, talking about the Grand Ronde Act, and if you could explain to us what that is and what that is meant to accomplish.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this bill. It was the first bill I introduced as a member of Congress, and it makes an amendment to the Grand Ronde Reservation Act. And the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde reside in my district. And, like Oregon's other indigenous peoples, they were the original stewards of our land and natural resources. Yet they've also faced tremendous injustices at the hands of the federal government. And we saw one of those injustices happen back in 1994. The tribe wanted to fix a historical survey error, which then led to the federal government making yet another error that took away the tribe's rights to pursue any further land claims, and even if additional mistakes in the future were discovered. And to date, the Grand Ronde is the only federally recognized tribe in Oregon that is subject to this restriction. So essentially what this bill does is it restores that ability to pursue land claims for the Grand Ronde. And and so it passed the House right before November. And then with the help of my colleague on the Senate side, Senator Merkley, we got it passed just before the Senate's Christmas break. And so it's headed on its way to the president's desk. And I'm very excited by that because, as you mentioned, not a lot of bills have passed this year.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on submitting that and having that make it through. A question on that. Now that assuming that it gets signed into law, uh, if it does go through, are there specific land claims that that the Grand Ronde Tribe is looking at pursuing?
So there was the historical survey error that was made. And so I know they're looking to correct some of that. It's called the Thompson Strip. And then in addition to that, they're not none that I know of. It just restores their ability to recognize, to be able to pursue those land claims. And it really just corrects an error from the past that was an injustice and, does not let them pursue what could be rightfully theirs, but nothing beyond that.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you very much, for explaining that too. So, as we're wrapping up 2023, heading into 2024, clearly a lot is going to happen here this next year. For you, what are your hopes to accomplish in 2024 with such a, I guess, divided time, but also with a presidential election coming up?
Thank you for that question. Something that I've been working on a lot and spent a lot of time, especially the first, I would say, 3 quarters of the year, was the Farm Bill reauthorization. And that is something that, again, I feel like is completely bipartisan. My colleagues across the nation see the importance of it. There are a lot of provisions in there that would address climate change in for farming, forestry, fishing. And so making sure that we have the right tools to assist and let our growers and those in the agriculture industry know that we are there for to make sure that climate does not destroy their industry, I think is really important. And so that will be a big priority for me. It's gotten hung up. We have a 1-year reauthorization at this point. And so, but I've heard from my chair and others, my subcommittee chair as well, that there is desire and hope to hopefully get something done, but we'll see.
With that desire and hope and just the state of where things are, do you feel like something is likely to get passed in that area or others? Or do you think this year could be another one where we see a little bit of a delay on actually passing a lot of bills?
I think honestly, what will determine this is what we do in the appropriations bills when we come back in January and February, and whether those get delayed and whether we're able to, to finally pass these funding budgets, I think will determine what the rest of the year looks like.
Fair enough. Well, Congresswoman, thank you very much for joining us here today. I appreciate your time, talking on the show and discussing these bills and what you've been doing there. And as always, thanks for joining us here on Fox 12 Now. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg. Pleasure to be here. Take care.
All right, you too. Okay, there we go. So again, if you're watching this live, this is Fox 12 Now. If you're watching afterward, that's a great way to watch as well. But these are the conversations that we get to have here, having a U.S. representative on to talk about that. And I'm sure a lot of people have opinions one way or another on whatever we discussed. You can leave those in the comments on Facebook or YouTube. And of course, you can always share this show and the different segments that we get to have here discussing these things. If there's something you would like us to discuss or you'd like to be covered, feel free to send me an email, fox12now@kptv.com. That's fox12now@kptv.com. And we'll see if we can get a segment or even get a politician or a representative or a senator on the show to discuss that as well. So you can always do that. All right, coming up here on this show, though, we're going to sign off here for just a little bit, but coming back around 1:30 or so, we understand the Portland police are going to be having a press conference to talk about a series of drug and gun arrests that they've had in an investigation that I guess has been going over this last year. So we'll be awaiting their information once that goes live, but we'll have it right here. So wherever you're watching, you can join me right back, and we'll be live streaming that, and we'll analyze what it is that they're going to be discussing on there as well. So thanks for joining us. Signing off right